So, of course, this is being a submariner and being on submarines in Vietnam. This is a very special presentation for me. The crazy thing is that, as most everybody does not know about submarines in Vietnam, and I was one of them. I was a naive young man when I enlisted, and I had no idea submarines were in Vietnam, but I shortly found out different. So I will go through these slides. This was the first boat I was assigned to. That's the USS Perch 313, and it was assigned to the Philippines as its home port. So when I got out of sub school and they gave me orders for the USS Perch, I figured I knew where I was going, and it wasn't just the Philippines. Ironically, the Perch doesn't have any torpedoes on at all. The forward torpedo tubes were taken out, and the after torpedo tubes were taken out. And that was to make room for troops, underwater demolition team, special forces, Marine Recon, etc., which we carried to Vietnam, went up the rivers, would take them to the beaches, etc. So the other submarine I was on, and I'll tell you later a few slides, was USS Tunney, which did the same thing. And the Tunney carried the troops back here, if you can see the hangar in the back. Now, the Tunney was originally part of the radius missile submarine corps, whereby it would have a radius missile in there, and they could roll out the missile and shoot off the deck. So what we're going to get into further along in the slides is an operation that I have pictures of, photographs of, an operation that we did in Vietnam. And that will give you an idea of some of the things. And as you can see, that is a 40 millimeter naval cannon on top that we would utilize in Vietnam. And if you see right here, that is the where the shells were kept. So right here we have the Perch and then the Tunney side by side. So the reason that is because I ended up serving on both boats, and the reason that is because the Perch was no longer able to dive. So a submarine that can't dive is not of very much use. So it was being replaced by the USS Tunney, and what happened was half the crew from the Tunney and half the crew from the Perch switched. And the idea there was half the crew would have knowledge of the engagements in Vietnam, and half the crew would understand all the ins and outs of the Tunney. Therefore, there would be no loss of time in training, etc. It was ready to go as soon as the transfer was made. So I never knew how they picked those people that were going to go to the Tunney from the Perch. But if you look at the ages, they were mostly young and unmarried individuals for some reason. I have no idea. But that's what happened. And so then I became part of the Tunney, which did the same operations in Vietnam. Now the Tunney, while it was in Vietnam, earned 5 battle stars, and unfortunately it also is listed on the register as being a boat that has been exposed to Agent Orange. And actually the same thing goes to the Perch. So I was definitely destined to be exposed to Agent Orange since I was on both boats. Now, some of the things that the Perch did was USS Perch crew frequently went ashore and deployed smaller watercraft into the Vietnam inland waters. Operation Deckhouse 2, which was in 1966, and Operation Double Eagle in 66, assisted a Marine landing force by working with UDT and conducting pre-invasion reconnaissance. So most of the time, the boats over there did a lot of reconnaissance work for either the Marines, the Army, or the Navy forces. Ironically, and this is, like I said, I was naive. I didn't think submarines were in Vietnam. That's actually one of the reasons why I volunteered for submarines. During the course of the war, there was 21 submarines that had orders to be in the Tonkin Gulf or be in close proximity to Vietnam. And, for instance, the Blueback, USS Blueback supported U.S. Ops in 1965 and 67. The USS Bluegill did reconnaissance duties and rescue missions in 1965. The Bonefish operated in the Gulf of Tonkin in 1966, and the Carboneros sent an aviator did Lifeguard vessels for down aviation pilots, which was one of the many things that the submarines did. I mean, the Carbonado was not the only one that did that. A number of submarines would pick up naval or Air Force people that had crashed in the waters around Vietnam to help save their lives, of course. I will get now into the operation that we did that I have the photographs of, and this was, of course, off the coast of Vietnam. There was this was a U.S. airplane that was actually going down and dropping napalm on the beach, trying to discourage the Viet Cong that had a group of South Vietnamese troops cornered and trapped on the beach. It was our job to go in and try to save them and get them off the beach. There's two things in this picture. Of course, you have a junk, a Vietnamese fishing boat, which you didn't know whether it was a fishing boat or something else. And out in the background, you have a U.S. destroyer. Now, the destroyer was sitting back there because it couldn't get in as close as we could to the beach. And so our orders were to pick up the Vietnamese, South Vietnamese that were on the beach and take it out to the destroyer. I'll go through these slides a little bit fast, but this is, we were definitely a ragtag military fighting group. If you see, the uniform of the day was actually Cutoffs and Sandals. And so there, while this was going on, and of course that's a 50 caliber machine gun that was mounted there to help in the operation. And there I'm back to the 40 millimeter count, which we actually utilized, and there was a church that was up on a hill, and we used that as a proximity to lob the 40 millimeter mount shells towards the church, anticipating that there might be some Viet Cong that were around the church. And there it shows, one of my shipmates loading the ammo into the gun. If you see right alongside here is we started to board to go into the beach in rubber rafts in order to bring back the Vietnamese that were trapped. And there's the result of the plane that was dropping napalm. And napalm is basically just forgive me for slowing down the presentation. Actually, napalm was nothing more than flammable jelly by mixing kerosene and thickening agents. Used basically as a firebomb that was dropped from the airplanes. I always point out this in this picture. If you look closely, this gentleman, shipmate, is an electrician. And if you notice those holes in his dungarees, they're actually from the battery acid when he's gone there testing the batteries. So that's Albert. He actually is from Orgsburg, Pennsylvania. So here we'll start a few slides showing, picking up the Vietnamese. And, we had our people, plus we had some special forces with us to bring them back. That's actually going out to the beach. There's two groups coming in. There, of course, we're on side of the boat. And there we have a number of boats that have gotten to the submarine, a couple of rafts, and unloading the Vietnamese. So at this point, we have almost everybody off the beach and on the submarine or close to the submarine. And of course, that's the destroyer that we're going to take them out and let them, get to be in safe territory. This picture actually shows us steaming towards the destroyer. And one thing, we did have orders not to let any of the Vietnamese groups down below because there's no way that we could tell whether they were friendly or they infiltrated and were, part of the Viet Cong. So you always had to be a little worried about something happening, and so we definitely weren't going to let them below decks. So they had to stay above decks, and we just put them out to the destroyer. But I'm sure they were all happy to be on the boat and not on the beach. I only put this in to demonstrate that the Republic of Vietnam definitely recognized submarines doing things in Vietnam and being very helpful. So this is a group of my my Vietnam medals. These two are the ones I'm most proud of because they're actually issued by the South Republic of Vietnam. So, the one is, basically that I was there and recognizing I was there, and the other one is basically what's called the Gallant Cross, which is a Vietnam medal given to, I'm not sure why, but courage in the face of the enemy. So somehow I earned that. The reality is, at 20 years old, or 19, I was probably 19 then, I was too dumb not to know the difference between courage and cowardice. And this gives you an indication that we were definitely specially trained as far as not doing normal Navy things, because you don't normally get issued a K-bar while you're in the Navy. Marines, Army, etc. And you need, if you look closely there, it says USN, which was definitely issued to me, to me. Now, on the USS Tunney, we had a great captain, and he really recognized the operations that we were going to have to do when the Tunney took over, and he sent a group to combat training in the Philippines, which was the group went through combat training with a group of Marines. So that was definitely because of the operations that we were doing. I guess that's really the end of my slides. Quick look to see if I missed anything that I wanted to say. I'll report. I'll be a little redundant, but just to go back and address the fact that most people don't know that there were submarines in Vietnam, and I want to make sure I presented that. And the fact is that there was 20 different submarines that was involved in the Vietnam War, and there was, and the fact is that the Perch and the Tunney is not the only boats that carried UDT and special forces and did those types of operations. You know, technically, I was in the Vietnam waters 2 weeks out of the month, usually, and then back in the Philippines. So undoubtedly the war didn't stop and the operations didn't stop. There was some other submarine that was taken over for us to make sure that the operations get started. But, you know, we had to get back to the Philippines for supplies, etc. Some of the one funny note I just thought of was I showed you some of the Vietnamese fishing boats. Well, you know, some of the operations that we did, especially with UDT, Underwater Demolition Team, we would take the boat to the bottom and lock out, which the individuals would lock out in the hatch and go into the beach, and then we would pick them up. Well, we'd wait for them. We'd be submerged on the bottom, and there was one time that we had a fishing boat that came along and tied their line to the periscope. So I had no idea why you could came to that conclusion. But there he is in the middle of Tonkin Bay, and I guess he figured, wow, I never saw this before, but it looks like a good place to tie up. So we had to send a couple divers out to chase them away before we got the group that we had brought there to come back. So it's there was definitely it was interesting. Our operations definitely were a little bit different. The good thing for me was I shouldn't say I envy. I feel sorry for all the Vietnam veterans that spend 24/7 in country, because I did not have to do that. I was in country short periods of time and back on the boat. So it was definitely much easier for me in Vietnam being on a submarine than it was for the Marines and Army and so forth that were in country 24/7. And even though I was exposed to Agent Orange, I still had it much easier than many. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
Why is a submarine called a boat and not a ship?
It's because it doesn't have all the running lights that a ship has. And so that's why it's referred to a boat versus a ship. And besides that, submariners like to be different. Yes, Peggy.
How did you get, how were you exposed to Agent Orange? Were they spraying down on the boat or the water?
Well, we would go up the rivers, like I mentioned. We would go up the bays, anywhere they're spraying Agent Orange. You're easily get exposed. It's in the water. We probably drank it. Realistically, we had stills on the boat, but they were old-fashioned stills that filtered the water for us to drink. So I didn't notice. I mean, I knew, and the VA recognized my exposure to Agent Orange years ago. I just recently read that both the Tunney and the Perch were on the list of boats that were exposed to Agent Orange. So it's, I don't think you got close to Vietnam without getting exposed to Agent Orange. You know, they did recognize what they call the blue Navy, which was those that got within 12 miles of Vietnam and were exposed to Agent Orange. I would end up being part of what's called the brown water group that was exposed, being closer, you know, basically right there. Yes?
How large was the crew and how long was the ship or the boat?
How long is it?
Yeah,
Lengthwise?
yeah.
300 feet. So, of course, it was, which I didn't mention, it was a World War II vintage boat. So was the Tunney. So were two other boats I was on. So there was not a lot of room in those boats at all. I always tell the story that I had one bunk where I had to get out of the bunk to turn over. So it was either laying on my back or laying on my stomach. Take your pick. And if you want to change, you had to get out. A funny bunk I had, which was really a good bunk, was I had a bunk that was on top of a torpedo. But that one actually was good because there was nothing above me except another torpedo that was on the side of me. So, yes, Peggy.
So if I'm just envisioning that you're in a bunk and you're on top of a torpedo. What did it sound like? Did you hear like a humming noise or did you hear?
Yeah, good question, because there's been a study relative to those old boats, and ironically, the majority of individuals that served have hearing problems, and the ones that don't have hearing problems were the people that were in the engine room, because they had ear muffs on, and of course you couldn't put that on the whole crew. So that was a thing that I looked up when I was going through my things with the VA, as far as documenting the fact that I couldn't hear, which I can't, etc. Yes.
Going up the rivers, but how deep were the rivers?
Well, we didn't go up real far. We went up far enough, you know, that of course we wouldn't hit bottom. And when we did that, we were on the surface. So one of the things on the Tunney, when I was doing those operations, I actually manned the 50 caliber machine gun on the top of the deck. And I always say the toughest part about that was getting the machine gun up through the hatch. Yeah.
Stayed out there or not?
Right. So that was the hard part. So, yes.
This may sound like a stupid question, but you said like sometimes you would go into Vietnam, but not often, and then you'd go back to the boat.
Yeah.
Like, did the boat, this may sound stupid, did the boat park underwater? Did it sit underwater until you?
A lot of times we went to the bottom and just sat there, and we did that a lot for some of the operations with the SEALs and UDT. So, during the operations, we worked with Marine Recon, Special Forces, and Underwater Demolition Team and SEALs. So there wasn't a branch of special force type units that we didn't work with. Peggy?
That's silly, but, so when you're all the way down in the water, are there windows? Like, could you see out? No?
No windows. No windows. The only person that got to see out was the officer of the deck that was manning the periscope.
So it's nothing like the Beatles' Yellow Submarine.
No, it's a good song.
I know.
How long did you stay under for, like, what's the longest period? That just seems creepy to be down on the ocean floor.
Well, the two boats at Perch and the Tunney, we didn't stay under the water very long. Day, 2 days, 3 days, about it. The other two boats I was on, I had 3 different employments where we did 57 days underwater. Yes.
So all you did was transport people?
Yes. Yes. All we did was transport people and did reconnaissance. I mean, we would take pictures and so forth of the area that we were at. Actually, there was one time where I was in charge of driving to Manila because we were out of film, and I just got back to the boat in time for it to leave for the operation. So, but I went to get the film in Manila. That was, of course, when the boat was in the Philippines.
Hey, how long was the transit from the Philippines, and was that submerged?
That's a good question. It was a couple days, and like I said, we would normally be in Vietnam waters about 2 weeks, and then go back to the Philippines. But it is relatively close to Vietnam, and of course that's Subic Bay where we would be going in, and that's where the boat was home ported.
When you made that trip, were you submerged?
We would be on the surface most of the way until we got into areas where we could be spotted. Yeah, that's a good question. Those old boats,
All the batteries, I guess.
yeah, those old boats, you spent most of the time on the surface because when you were submerged, you were running on the battery. And so when you, in order to charge the batteries, you had to be on the surface and run the engines. Now, when I said about those 50-some days under, those O-boats were, after World War II, were fitted with what's called a snorkel mask. And you raised the snorkel mask to bring in air to run the batteries while you were still 80 to 100 feet down.
You run the engines,
Run the engines, yes.
What happened to the boat that could no longer submerge?
What happened to the boat that was? It was sold for scrap.
Okay.
The Perch was sold for scrap.
Over in like Vietnam
No, it went back to, yeah,
back to the United States.
went back to the United States. I know it went back to Pearl. I don't know where it went after Pearl. So, but yeah, it was sold for scrap. Now, the Tunney was actually used for target practice. So, of course, none of of course, the four boats that I was on over my short career are no longer around. The one boat, and I forget which it was, but it was actually sold in another country. So, Peggy?
Have you been on a submarine since? Have you gone to any ones that
Well, a couple things. I go to actually the USS Tunney reunions because that was actually my qualified boat. I qualified on the Tunney. And I've been in San Diego twice where we were given permission to tour one of the nuclear fast attack submarines. So I was on that way. I was never back out to sea in one though. So, and the other thing I did maybe 5-6 years ago, they had a program back to sub school. So I took advantage of that and went to New London and went back to sub school. That was interesting.
Did you get back on in like a modern day submarine?
That was all modern stuff. It was like being like Disney World, you know. They had,
Did you like take a trip isn't the right word, but did you go?
I didn't submerge in anything.
That's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, when you at sub school, there's two things that people think are difficult, and I guess they are. One is that you had a tank that you had to start at the bottom of a 100-foot tank and would fill with water and swim up to the top. And the crazy thing is, you're down there and the water is heavy. Water is heavy, so you're pressured, and you're in a chamber at the bottom, which they pressurize so that you can go out and swim up. And while you're swimming up, you have to blow out your air because your air had gotten condensed. And if you don't, you burst your lungs.
that was part of your training? When you were training?
I'm sorry, what?
You were trained,
That was part of the training. Yeah, that was part of the training.
Can you hold your breath really long, or were you able to hold your breath very long?
Well, you had to blow out. You couldn't hold your breath. Had to do the opposite of what you would think. Or else the air in your lungs would expand and rupture your lungs. So when I went through sub school, the statistics were that 50% of the students made it through, and then 50% of those ended up getting qualified on the submarine. So only about 25% of the people that decided to volunteer for submarines actually made it through. Ironically, to qualify, you had to learn every facet of the submarine. Every valve, every line, water line, hydraulic lines, had to learn how to operate every piece of equipment, including the engines. And what I did to learn that, and I still have my drawings, I drew everything. So I would go down, I was down in the bilges following the hydraulic lines and water lines and indicating the valves along the way, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a good way to learn.
But that was my way of learning. So, and you really got asked, had to get signed off on each item by 3 different people. You had to get signed off by whoever was in charge, let's say the engineman. You had to get signed off by the officer of the deck, and you had to get signed off by the engineering officer if you were doing the engine work. So I learned a lot. Any last questions?
One last one. What was your rating?
I was I got out as E5, and I was a storekeeper, which means I was a parts guy. I'm the one that kept the boat running as far as all the parts go. That was my day job, and of course everybody, that's why I always put it, that was my day job. And you know, you always had to stand watch, and that was initially I was always on the planes, which is I'm sorry. The planes are when you look at a submarine movie, you'll see those big wheels in the one room, and there's 2 guys, one guy on each, and it's really controlling the bow planes and the stern planes, which is part of you going up and down in a submarine. I did that a lot. I also served watches on what is the hydraulic manifolds, where you're pumping, you know, doing the hydraulics back and forth. The trim manifolds, which is really pumping water from one ballast tank to another to keep the submarine level. So that was one of my watch stations a lot of times. I never stood an engine watch other than to get qualified. So, any other question?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your service.
Hope everybody enjoyed it.
So Denny, what would your uniform be? Would it be the standard
Yeah.
Navy uniform?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And since I have some Vietnam veterans here, or veterans, there's a uniform up here that someone asked me. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stripes on the sleeves. Does anyone know what that is? Anyone know? This one right here. I can actually get it and show you.
Stripes on the lower sleeve?
On the lower sleeve, this one right here.
3 years, 1 for every 5 years. 3 years of service, right?
Huh?
Aren't you gonna tell
What
them
are
about
these?
getting
3 years of service.
and almost done?
Right
Aren't you gonna tell them
Each
about,
stripe is 3 years
you
of
know,
service.
they should be good
Okay.
swimmers
Yeah.
if they go in the submarine in case they fall off.
And
You're
why?
not gonna
Is
tell
this
them about
Marines?
that?
Because
No,
of the
you don't want
pants?
to.
That's Army.
This is Army.
Army Gus.
It's not labeled, and I didn't know. And who's the gentleman who asked me? There you are.
Thank you.
Okay, now we know, right?
Now we know.
I know as well. But that's pretty. It's pretty beautiful uniform.
I would say he's a lifer.
Effort? Yeah.
Better be if that's what
That is amazing. Is that Denny?
Yeah.
Do you have dress uniform too, besides that type of uniform, or is
Yeah.
it navy? Okay,
Yeah, we had dress whites and dress blues.
and dress blues. Yeah, that's one thing we don't really have a navy uniform, so we gotta get one.
Now, I have one last thing since my wife said I should mention it. On the USS Tunney, off the coast of Okinawa, we were going to Okinawa to pick up a group of Marine Recon to train with them. I got washed overboard in a typhoon. So if you ever saw the perfect storm, that's what it was, a 60-foot wave that came across. And you might ask why was out on the boat? And the answer for that is that, first of all, those O-boats, and because, we talked about surfacing as far as running the batteries and so forth, they would ride out any storm on the surface because they want to make sure they didn't surface and get hit by a wave that could actually roll the boat. So I was on the helm at the time. That was one of my other duties a lot. So I was driving the boat. And and I always hated the helm in bad weather because you had to try to keep it on course, and the thing kept going like that and that. So after line locker broke open and mooring line was going out, and the officer of the day up in the conning tower was concerned that it would get caught in the screws. So I made the mistake that you never make. He asked for volunteers to go out and get the mooring line in. So since I hated the helm, I figured I'll go. Can't be worse than being on the helm. And so one other gentleman with me, we went out, got to about, and there's like a railroad tie that you hook on to go down the boat, especially in rough weather. So I hooked up. My partner hooked up. We got as far as the aft of the boat. We got all the way back there. And the next wave that came across hit us waist high. We both grabbed the capstan because that was in front of, I was on one side of the capstan, which is what used to bring in the mooring line. And at that point, it was all we could hold on, just that getting hit waist high. And I turned to him and said, we need to get the F out of here. And as I said that, I looked up and I saw the 60-foot wave coming. And that just tore the lines right off. And we were both in the water. So I always say it this way. For me, it was a near-death experience because I had no idea whether I was going up or down. And finally, I hit the surface gasping for air, so apparently I was going up. So it took me about an hour to get back to the boat, and the other gentleman got drifted out further than me, and they a number of divers from the boat went out and got him. But that was my experience with the typhoon.
Did you swim back?
I'm sorry, what?
How did you get back to the boat? Did you swim
I swam.
through a typhoon?
I swam and ironically there was a wave that came up and basically threw me back on the boat.
Kind of like Jonah.
Okay, now I'm done, I think.
And